2, 1. And welcome to Ducks No Sports. This week's video brought to you by no one, because I have no sponsor and will never have no sponsor. But this week I start my NBA previews, as this time I preview the Atlantic, sometimes called the Titanic, because it's not always the best division out there. Should be an interesting year this year because a lot of good teams in this division, from the Celtics to the Raptors to the 76ers to the Knicks to the Nets. Pretty much everybody. But we'll start with last year's Atlantic champions, the Boston Celtics. Biggest question going is, can they be a good team again? As it's been the last few years, been a championship contender kind of team. And the offseason, adding some depth and some grit to their front line by drafting Sillinger at Ohio State. Big fan of Sillinger. I thought, got a bad rep in college. He does have injury problems, yes, but is a very, very good player. Will add some depth on their bench, which they had no bench last year. So add some depth on their bench, some rebounding off their bench, some shot blocking off their bench, and also adding another guy like it was Syracuse, Fave Melo, did the same thing. Add some depth, some rebounding, some blocked shots. And I think they'll be a better defensive team this year with these two guys coming off the bench, giving guys like Garnett a rest once in a while, which he didn't have much of last year. But it's not all sunny in Boston right now, as they're losing Ray Allen to Miami Heat. Huge loss, no doubt. Probably the best three-point shooter in the history of the NBA. And will be missed, because I don't know, there's nobody in the roster I see that can replace Ray Allen. And Ray Allen will be a Hall of Famer, and they really have to find a replace for Ray Allen. But I still think this is a very good team with Rondo, who gets no respect at all. But Rondo was a top 5 point guard in the league, no doubt. And still guys like Garnett, who are still old but are still getting it done. Guys like Paul Pierce still getting it done. Are the Boston Celtics a championship caliber team more? I don't think they're that good anymore, but are they the best team in this division? I think they are still the best team in the Atlantic this year. Will they challenge for championship? I don't see that, with teams like the Pacers on the rise and teams like Miami Heat being still a great team. And I think the Boston Celtics will have a good year. We'll go back to the playoffs. We'll come a little bit short in the playoffs and not go back to the NBA Finals. And our next team, the New York Knickerbockers, aka the New York Knicks. Biggest question, can they get over Lynn Sandy in New York? As, of course, the biggest story last year in the NBA, one of the biggest stories in the NBA last year was Jeremy Lin, a guy who came out of nowhere and just tore it up. Very interesting story, but Jeremy Lin is no longer a New York Knick, as he signed a deal in the offseason with the Houston Rockets. Interesting deal, very lengthy deal, and I do not blame the Knicks for not matching that deal, because, in my opinion, Jeremy Lin was a flash in the pan. Well, can he be a solid starting point guard? No. Was he a flash in the pan that will never be heard from again? Yes. That's what that was last year. That wasn't real. That wasn't real what we saw last year. That was more just a guy gave his opportunity and took the most of it. By the end of the day, I don't think he was really that good. I think he was just put in a good spot with nobody really around him. As far as the point guard position, nobody they could really rely on. And I just believe the New York Knicks are better off for not having Jeremy Lin. And this team should be a good team again. I mean, this team still has one of the best players in the league, in my opinion, in Carmelo. Not a huge Stoudemire fan. I think he's more of a selfish player. You saw that last year in the playoffs with that incident with him punching the glass. Very selfish player. And that being said, despite those two players, not very much here. They have a lot of holes in this team. Do not like them going this year, and this team could really fall off. Like this team wasn't really that good last year. They kind of snuck in the playoffs and they got their ass kicked by the Miami Heat in the playoffs. But do not like next year. I think they're going to have a fall off this year with other teams in this division coming up, like Toronto and Philly. And I just think this team's going to fall off this year. And I think what last year was more of a delusion I don't think that was real, and I think New York Knicks are in for a rough 2012-2013. And our next team is the Philadelphia 76ers, who in the offseason made a big splash as requiring guys like Andrew Bynum, Jason Richardson. Yes, Jason Richardson still in the league and still putting up productive numbers. And will this improve the team? I think it will, because you had a solid team last year. It was 8 seed in the playoffs. Start of the year they were so good, and really, shocked some teams in the playoffs. Were shocking the Chicago Bulls in the first round. Very interesting team last year. Kind of came out of nowhere. No respect to Philly. I shouldn't make any noise. Thought they'd be one of the worst teams in the league, but then really made some noise the start of the year by being one of the best teams in the East. Then fell off majorly and just sneaking to the playoffs, and then did well in the playoffs. Upsetting the Bulls in the first round. Nobody saw that one coming. Of course, it helps when their best player, Derrick Rose, goes down. And then in the next round, almost beating the Boston Celtics in the Game 7, almost beating the Boston Celtics. Very interesting year last year for Philly. The question is, can they do it again this year? Can they go back to the playoffs? With Andrew Bynum, in my opinion, Andrew Bynum is ready to be a star in this league. He's not already. Andrew Bynum is a great player. And I think Andrew Bynum will continue to be a great player with Philly. And I think this team's ready to take off. And I think the Philadelphia 76ers could be a dark horse to win the Atlantic this year. And watch out for the 76ers, because this year I think they're going to take off. I think the 76ers are in for a good 2012-2013. And possibly make the Eastern Conference Finals. That's a bold statement right now, but I think it could happen in 2013 because I'm really in love with this 76ers team. And our next team, the Toronto Raptors, who of course in the offseason might be seen as losers, but I think they were winners in the offseason. I'll tell you why. Did they get Steve Nash? No. Did they get a great draft pick? Not really. I would still took Doc Rivers instead of Terrence Ross, but did they add quality to the roster? Yes. Landry Fields will add quality to that roster. A guy who can come off the bench and score. Maybe start and score. Maybe be your starting two guard and score. Interesting how they do that. But I'm a big Landry Fields fan. I think there's another reason I don't like the Knicks this year. It's because you don't have that guy off the bench anymore. And Landry Fields, a guy who is a Premier League defensive kind of guy. Which Dwayne Casey loves that kind of guys. But he can still score. He's still a great offensive player, and I really like Landry Fields. I think he can be a great player this year. Another guy, in Lowry, the point guard they got from Houston, another gritty kind of, Philly kid, guy that Casey's just going to love. And I think I believe Laurie fits Casey's system better than Steve Nash would. Because the Toronto Raptors, let's be honest, last year, they took a lot of strides last year. Did they make the playoffs? No, but they took a lot of strides, becoming respect around the league. And I really believe the Toronto Raptors are going to be a good team again this year, playing more of a defensive kind of game, tying a lot of things up their defense. They were a pretty good defensive team last year. A lot of players you saw last year, kind of more offensive players like Bargnani, really came in and worked on the defensive kind of game. And that's just the kind of game that Dwayne Casey's going to play, a defensive game where he's just going to beat you up for 48 minutes, and that's the kind of game the Toronto Raptors, to win, that's how they're going to have to play in the Eastern Conference. And I really like this team going forward. Can the Toronto Raptors win the Atlantic? It's very possible. That might sound crazy, but it's very possible for the Toronto Raptors to win the Atlantic. Will they? Well, time will be seen, but again, like I said, they did not get Steve Nash. But they added quality players, and I still believe the Toronto Raptor team can be a very good team. And let's be honest, they could have made the playoffs last year. If Bargnani didn't get hurt near the end of the season, they would probably made the playoffs last year. So I think adding quality guys like Lowry and Fields and other players, and the young stud they got coming in as the rookie, I believe the Toronto Raptors are in for a very good 2012-2013 season. And our last team, the new revamped Brooklyn Nets. As new town, new city, but same old crappy Nets. As, let's be honest, this team, They banked a lot on last year and getting in the offseason, getting Dwight Howard. Didn't happen. He ended up going to the Lakers. I mean, Darren Williams is one of the best players in the league, no doubt. But he can't do it all his own. Of course, they bring in Joe Johnson. That might be an okay tandem, but I don't think that'll be a good enough tandem to make the playoffs. I mean, I think this team, I look at this team, there's just holes right and left all over the place. And I just think that the Brooklyn Nets are going to have a rough year because there's nothing really there. Darren Williams, one of the best players in the league, no doubt, but he can't do it all himself. And they've got a few more good players, you know. Lopez is a good player. Joe Johnson, a couple of years ago was good, but he's kind of fallen off the last few years. I just believe the Brooklyn Nets are going to be a rough team this year. I don't expect Brooklyn to be anywhere near the playoffs once again, and I believe the Brooklyn Nets in for a rough year. And I think they'll come nowhere near your division champion. As I believe your division champion will be, once again, I think the Raptors are going to challenge. I think Philly could challenge, but this is still Boston's division to lose. And I believe your 2012-2013 Atlantic Division champions are the Boston Celtics. Well, that's it for this time. But tune in next time because I'll be breaking down every division in the NBA. Of course, the NBA is coming up. Can't wait. Should be a great year with some great teams. Well, till next time, I'm Andrew Duxford saying I'm Dux, and I know sports. Kind of.